The Galaxy Z Fold4 is finally here, and whilst the biggest news this year is that, well, there is no real news, there are still quite a few reasons why I think that the Galaxy Z Fold4 is objectively better than other foldables, and most notably the Pixel Fold. Firstly is the form factor. Now, as far as foldables go, you either have the wider, more passport size like the Pixel Fold, or the more common, thinner size like the Z Fold. Now, there is no denying it, but the wider cover screen on the Pixel Fold is more usable than the Z Fold. I find when using the Z Fold that there comes a certain point when using the front screen where it just becomes restrictive, like mostly when typing because the keys are just so close together, so you're forced to then open up the phone and use it two-handed to finish off whatever you're doing. But after opening up these devices, there is a noticeable difference in weight, and particularly the worry that I have over dropping my phone. Now, with the wider Pixel Fold, my hand just about gets to the fold at the back, like the halfway point, and the phone then rests on my pinky finger, which is kind of a quarter of the way over the phone. Now, there have been a few occasions where I've been using it like this, and then needed to use my other hand to then pick up something or grab something. And now I have a problem because the balance is really all off. Also, because my hands only just reach halfway, it is almost impossible to close this thing like one-handed, unless you were to, of course, like flip the phone around, and then you can just about do it. But this isn't a problem with the Z Fold. Now, my hands can reach beyond the fold at the back. My pinky finger also sits around about halfway in the center of the screen, and you can close it one-handed. The second reason is around the app experience of using this phone. Now, simply put, more apps are optimized for this more vertical position than they were with the Pixel Fold's more horizontal position. Now, you can, of course, just rotate the Pixel and you have pretty much the same experience, but now you've got your finger over the crease. But overall, you will find that more apps are optimized for the Z Fold and therefore make far better use of the extra space. Which is pretty silly, really, because even Google's own YouTube Studio looks better on the Z Fold than it does on the Pixel. Twitter, or X, also better. Facebook Messenger, better. Tesla, better. Threads, better. TikTok, better. Reddit, better. Now, there are just a handful of apps that I use daily which do work across both. Discord works, Home Assistant also works. Thankfully, also Beeper and Spark, which are my two most used apps for email and instant messaging, work just fine. And also 1Password, which is literally the app which makes, testing all of these Android phones so much easier. Because I can literally, pick up any new phone, install 1Password, sign in, and immediately just have access to all my usernames, all my passwords. So I'm just never locked in to using the Google or the Samsung or Apple's built-in password manager, which, if you've ever picked up a device other than the one that you're using, can be an absolute nightmare to use. Now, they've actually been a really long-term sponsor on this channel for, a really long time now, and kindly agrees to sponsor this video. So if you ever want to sign up for 1Password, then there's always going to be a link down below this video to get a nice discount. So if you want to get easy access to your passwords when switching devices, but also be able to store things other than just passwords, I even store things like personal tax information and my wife's personal tax information because she forgets that stuff. So yeah, just link down below, pick up a discounted 1Password family or personal subscription. And then we've got the chip that runs on the Z Fold. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is an absolute beast when it comes to power, efficiency, battery, everything about it is so good. And I'm so happy that the Fold5 runs this chip. It's actually one of the main reasons why I switched to the S23 Ultra. The performance is just insane. Everything opens in an instant. I've not had a single slowdown, bug, or issue with anything running on this phone. Now, I have seen some pretty pointless comparisons on social media where people will just open an app and immediately close it and use this as a way to tell you which phone is better. Honestly, it's just a pointless comparison. Nobody actually uses the phone that way, do they? They don't go and open 50 apps and close them immediately before you've actually gone into them. And I don't make a habit of doing benchmark tests because, again, that's not typically how people use their phones each day. So my testing always comes down to real world, everyday use, which, of course, means that there's going to be at least some bias to my opinion, and my use isn't going to be the same as others potentially. But what I hope you'll see through my content is consistency with the way that I test each of these devices, so I can give you, my experience at least of actually using this phone compared to the others that I've used. And if you like that, then maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I would hugely appreciate it. We've actually recently hit 100,000 subscribers. and I'm not yet brave enough to open up the award. Not sure how I should do it yet. But also feel free to join us on our Discord group, which I'll link down below, the subscribe button. There's just a really small group of us in there at the moment who get, early access to what goes on behind the scenes. I'm sharing kind of my initial findings on the flips and folds and watches and all those kind of things. So yeah, I'd love for you to join if you want to hang out. But anyway, battery performance on the Z Fold is so refreshing. Now I'm getting an all-day battery life with the Z Fold 5, better than the Z Fold 4, and better than the Pixel, which is an interesting one for me because I kind of prefer the Pixel. Now I typically wake up around 7 and go to bed around like midnight, and I always have more battery left in the Z Fold than on the Pixel. And I think overall, when comparing the Snapdragon to the Tensor G2, I'd pick the Snapdragon every time. Like, it always and consistently performs better across such a wide variety of tasks and use cases, and thermal management is also in a class of its own with the Z Fold. I've not really experienced any moments where the phone has gotten warm in my hands, whereas the Pixel Fold does have a habit to get quite warm even when doing quite basic tasks on it. Now, like I said, I love the Pixel Fold, I love the cameras, but as far as the chipset goes, the Snapdragon wins every time for me. An area where I wish there would be some more technological advancements though, is the charging situation. Now you've got a 4,400 milliamp hour battery with 25 watt wired charging on the Fold 5 versus a 4,821 milliamp hour battery with 21 watt wired charging on the Pixel Fold. Now, neither of these is that impressive, in all honesty. Both of them take a fairly long time to charge. Z Fold 5 does take the win though in charging speeds. It's nothing quite like the S23 Ultra's 45 watt charging, which goes literally like 0 to 100 in more like an hour. But these are obviously trade-offs you have when it comes to foldable phones, most likely because these foldables come with like a split battery across the two, one on each side, which is going to then restrict what you can do with fast charging, since the components are going to have to be super thin to run over this hinge in the center. Now, this wouldn't be a phone review without mentioning the cameras, of course, but since this phone is basically the same as last year's model, there's nothing really to report here. They are still very, very good, very capable cameras. They take great shots in like pretty much all situations, though the video quality still a bit questionable. Ultimately, this will come down to personal opinion, but I do think that the Z Fold 4, I'm talking like an American now, Z Fold, the Z Fold 4 and the Z Fold 5's photos are objectively good, and you won't be disappointed with their performance. One thing I will say here is that I find using the combined kind of front screen and rear cameras a much easier experience with the Z Fold. Now, it's a pretty straightforward operation. You just tap the button, open the phone up, hold it in any real orientation, and snap the photo and you get your shots. But once again, going back to form factor and how everything just feels like perfectly balanced with the Fold 5. Now this is another fast way to drop your phone if you're using a Pixel Fold. Like, unfold the phone and suddenly all of the weight you're holding is on the opposite side of the phone. So you'll find yourself having to adjust your grip sometimes multiple times to be able to like take a photo. It's just really, really difficult, I find, holding the Pixel Fold when taking photos compared to the Z Fold, Z Fold 5, where you can, again, balance the weight. It's just a lot easier to hold up and actually hold up to get those shots. Now, with that said, there are two areas where I think the Z Fold 5 is the clear winner. Now, firstly, with the S Pen. Now, if you are someone who's a fan of using one, then of course the Z Fold 5 is the obvious choice because there is no Pixel Pen or anything yet. But also, when it comes to pricing, now this is always one of the best, but also the worst things when it comes to Samsung. Now, if you are in the US, you can be pretty sure to get some of the very best option when it comes to upgrading last year's model to this year's, sometimes making the upgrade a literal no-brainer at very little to like sometimes zero cost. But here in the UK, not so much. Like, you get a free bump up to the next storage, so 512 gig for the price of the 256 gig. And if you trade in a Fold 4, you get £650 off, bringing the total price of this Fold 5 to £1,099. But I heard there were some great student deals in the US, so I thought I'd check out what they were like in the UK. Now, my wife's studying, so I'm fortunate enough to get access to these deals, and you do get a 10% discount. You also get the same bump up to 512 gig for storage, but when trading in the same Z Fold 4 or 256 gig model, you now only get £360 off. So now, in total, you're at £1,214 10 pence, and are actually worse off as a student than just ordering without your extra 10% discount. So, as far as upgrading from the Fold 4 to the Fold 5. It is not worth it, and there's a lot more you could actually do with the extra grand it's going to cost you. If you are on the Fold 3, however, then I do recommend upgrading. I think there's plenty of features on here. The processing, the cameras, the screen, the fold, just everything on it works really, really nicely. But if you're on the fence trying to figure out if the Z Fold 5 is for you or if the Pixel Fold is a better option, then it really just comes down to personal preference. And in terms of which phone I'm going to be sticking with as my phone of choice, well, you can learn all about that one right here.